Have you ever had to deal with a nightmare HOA? You know the type, the ones who measure your grass with a ruler and fine you if your trash bin sits at the curb 5 minutes too long. Well, today's story is about an HOA that pushes authority way past the limit. And let's just say, in the end, Mother Nature handled things personally. So grab some popcorn, because this one takes a wild turn. Our story begins with a man we'll call Grandpa. And he wasn't just any grandpa. He owned a massive, breathtaking stretch of land that had been in his family for generations. It was a sanctuary, untouched woods, a glassy lake, and peaceful marshland. Unfortunately, that quiet paradise bordered a brand new, very upscale housing development. And with that development came a brand new, very aggressive homeowners association. From the very beginning, they had their eyes on Grandpa's property. They didn't see private land. They saw opportunity. Walking trails, a lakeside park, maybe a playground for their residents. The only issue? It wasn't theirs. Grandpa was a reasonable man. He'd lived there his entire life and believed in being a good neighbor. So when the HOA first approached him, he calmly explained that the land was private property. It wasn't for sale. It wasn't open to the public. To make things crystal clear, he installed professional private property and no trespassing signs all along the border he shared with the subdivision. But this HOA didn't accept the word no. Their leader, a woman we'll call Karen, drove a spotless white SUV and dressed exclusively in tennis whites. She carried herself like she ran the entire county. And apparently, she believed Grandpa's signs were more like polite suggestions. At first, the trespassing was subtle. A few residents wandered onto the land for scenic walks, letting their dogs run loose. Grandpa would approach them calmly, escort them back, and politely remind them it was private property. Most responded with dismissive waves or snide remarks like, "We're just enjoying nature." So Grandpa started documenting everything. Photos, dates, notes. He had a feeling this wasn't going to stop. Sure enough, things escalated. The HOA sent him a formal letter, not asking, but informing him that they would be using the adjacent undeveloped land for community recreational activities. They even attached a schedule of events. Grandpa was stunned by the audacity. He responded with a certified letter from his attorney, clearly stating that any entry onto his property would be considered trespassing and that the HOA would be held fully liable for any incidents. That should have ended it. A legal notice tends to get people's attention. But not this HOA. They were determined. What Grandpa didn't advertise, but every local knew, was that his lake and surrounding marshland were a natural alligator habitat. And not tiny reptiles either. These were massive, prehistoric-looking gators that had lived there peacefully for decades. Grandpa respected them and kept his distance. As one final warning, he added new signs. Large, bright red, impossible to miss. They read, "Danger, alligator habitat. Do not enter." He placed them directly beside the private property notices. Surely a warning about giant reptiles would stop them. Apparently not. 1 week later, Grandpa was sipping his morning coffee on the porch when he saw a line of cars pulling up along the edge of his property. The HOA had organized a community campout weekend. Families poured out of their vehicles carrying tents, coolers, folding chairs, and inflatable rafts. Karen stood front and center with megaphone, directing everyone toward a clearing right beside the lake. Grandpa watched in disbelief as they marched past the alligator warning signs without even slowing down. Some people pointed and laughed, likely assuming it was just a grumpy old man trying to scare them off. Now Grandpa had a decision to make. He could march down there, call the sheriff, and spark a huge confrontation, or he could let events unfold naturally. He had warned them, legally and clearly, for their own safety. They chose to ignore it. So he grabbed his binoculars, a fresh notepad, and his video camera. Then he settled into his favorite rocking chair on the porch, which offered a safe, elevated, perfect view of the entire lakeshore. He was about to witness the most satisfying lesson imaginable. The first day went about as you'd expect. Loud music blasted. Kids screamed and splashed. Adults tried to float across the murky lake on inflatable rafts. Grandpa filmed it all. At one point, he saw a man paddle out on a bright yellow unicorn float. only to frantically paddle back after spotting two eyes barely breaking the surface of the water. He probably convinced himself it was just a log. The campers remained blissfully unaware. But when dusk fell, the swamp came alive. Deep, guttural bellows echoed across the lake, the unmistakable call of large bull gators. It's a primal, chilling sound if you're not used to it. The laughter around a campfire slowly faded, replaced with uneasy whispers. "What was that?" someone asked. "Probably just a bullfrog," another answered, far less confidently. Grandpa chuckled quietly. Those weren't bullfrogs. That was Big Al and the rest of the resident gators. They were most active at dawn and dusk, especially when strangers invaded their territory. And now those strangers had set up tents, grills, and coolers full of food directly on their shoreline. By nightfall, the campers huddled closer to their fires, pretending not to hear the splashes and heavy movements coming from the dark water. Then, around midnight, chaos exploded. A string of terrified screams shattered the quiet. Grandpa zoomed his camera in. One of the gators, likely drawn by the smell of grilled hot dogs, had lumbered toward a cooler left outside a tent. A man stumbled out with a flashlight and came face to face with a 10-foot reptile hissing inches away. Panic spread instantly. People tripped over tent ropes. Coolers flipped. Food scattered everywhere, only attracting more curious gators from the lake. It was absolute pandemonium. The same residents who believed they were embracing nature were now fleeing from its true owners. They didn't bother packing up. Tents, camping gear, inflatable floats, and carefully prepared organic meals were abandoned where they stood. Families sprinted for their cars, slipping through mud and tearing out of there as fast as possible. Within 30 minutes, the campsite was empty. It looked like a hurricane had blown through. Trash covered the ground. Gear lay scattered everywhere. And a few very satisfied alligators were enjoying what remained of the buffet. The next morning, Grandpa took a slow walk down to the lake, camera in hand. In daylight, the destruction was even more dramatic. Tents were shredded. Coolers were crushed. Fresh gator tracks were stamped across the mud. He carefully documented everything: the abandoned equipment, the trash, the reptile activity. Then he made 2 phone calls. First, to his lawyer. Second, to the county's Fish and Wildlife Commission and Environmental Protection Department. He handed over all the evidence: the trespassing, the unauthorized campout, the chaotic retreat, and the environmental mess left behind in a protected wildlife habitat. The consequences were devastating. The HOA was slammed with massive county fines for illegal dumping and disturbing protected land. But that was only the beginning. Residents whose expensive camping gear had been destroyed were furious. They had been told the event was safe and officially approved. Lawsuits poured in from their own members for negligence and property loss. When the HOA's insurance company reviewed the certified legal warning and the clearly posted alligator hazard signs, they immediately canceled coverage. They refused to cover any damages or legal fees. The once arrogant HOA collapsed under the financial pressure. Karen was forced to sell her house to help pay mounting legal costs and was removed from the board in disgrace. Eventually, the entire association filed for bankruptcy. As for Grandpa, he hired a professional cleanup crew, paid for by court order, to restore his land. He even kept whatever salvageable camping equipment remained, though some of it showed clear signs of gator interest. And at the entrance to his property, he installed one final sign. It read, "Survivors will be prosecuted." Peace returned. The alligators resumed their quiet routines. And the entitled HOA learned an expensive, muddy lesson about respecting private property and respecting nature. Sometimes the sweetest revenge isn't loud or angry. Sometimes it's just sitting on your porch, rocking gently, and letting a few hungry alligators take care of the problem. So what do you think? Was that the most satisfying karma you've ever heard? Let me know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe for more tales of well-earned revenge. Thanks for watching.